FPL Game Week 20 transfer targets. In today's video, we're going to have a look at some of the best players you should be considering buying into your team going into Game Week 20. We are now officially halfway through the season. It is time to really be putting our plans into place to get the best ranks possible for the second half of the season. We'll have a look across defenders, midfielders, forwards, where you should really be prioritizing your transfers, who the best forwards are, should you really all be buying Chris Wood this week. What is up everyone, FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here, and happy new year everyone. Thank you all very much for joining. Apologies that the videos over the past couple of days have been a little bit absent. It has been New Year, it's been Christmas, there's been a very busy period, so I had just a couple of days away. We are back, videos are officially back. I'm back in London on Friday as well, so we are fully back. The schedule is back as it should. I just had a couple of days, which is why there wasn't an upload in terms of transfer plans, but we've had loads of sort of games and stuff going on that it was pretty difficult to try and fit a game in. But we're starting with this, and then there'll be team selection tomorrow, there'll be final decisions, and then the deadline stream on Saturday before we get back into a more normal looking routine in terms of videos and FPL deadlines and game weeks and stuff like that. Before we dive in, all the data taken from these videos, from these charts that we'll look at the beginning, are built from the fantastic Fantasy Football Scout members area. If you're having a look to try and boost your rank for that second half of the season, do check them out with a link in the description. They are offering a discount if you use that link as well. What we're going to start off by having a look at is who has the best fixtures over the next 6 weeks with these new graphics that we are building for this video every single week. Now, interesting that Fulham are now right at the top. So if you're looking for a defender in the likes of Castagna and Robinson, if you're looking midfield in the likes of Iwobi, or up front, Raul Jimenez, they are going to be right up there. Lower down the list, you've got the likes of Crystal Palace in at third. Aston Villa, if you're looking at the likes of Ollie Watkins or own Morgan Rogers, despite him being suspended this week, might still be a player to hold. Liverpool right up there, Arsenal and Chelsea as well. Jackson is a big player that's causing a lot of debate this week, along with Cole Palmer and Enzo Fernandez, with the performances Chelsea have put on over the past couple of weeks. But with the fixtures that they do have over the next 3-4 weeks, but even over the next 6 game weeks, all the way up until game week 25, and with them starting to play just 1 game a week now, I do think there is a lot to be said about keeping a hold of your Chelsea players in the likes of Jackson or in the likes of Enzo Fernandez as well. You start to see Nottingham Forest starting to come back up with a pretty nice run of fixtures. The only difficult one they've really got that you might not want players for in the next 6 is Liverpool at home, which does come in game week 21. But outside of that, it is a really nice run. Newcastle as well. A lot of us are owning Alexander Isak, but Anthony Gordon and Lewis Hall continue to be popular transfers in, and you can see why. Spurs away this week, but after that, a lot of nice games with 3 out of the next 4 after that being at home against Wolves, Bournemouth and Fulham. Now, when you start to have a look a little bit lower down the list, bottom of the fixture ticket is going to be Wolves. Now, if you own Nori or Matheus Cunha, you may be looking to sell now. Not only is Matheus Cunha suspended for probably their only good fixture that they have in the next 6, it's then a pretty difficult run after they play Nottingham Forest at home this week. Also low down the list, if you're owning Manchester City, they've had a few good games, but it's starting to get a little bit more difficult in terms of defensive. Some of the attacking threat could still do well if you're owning the likes of Savinho or the likes of Phil Foden. Manchester United as well, quite low down, but once they've got the Liverpool away fixture out of the way after this week, things do start to get a little bit better. But it is really Fulham and Crystal Palace, maybe Aston Villa, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, that still have the best runs over the next few weeks with some good assets you can buy as well. So then having a look at the underlying data for some of the best attacks and best defenses we've got so far this season, then of course relating it to the past 6 game weeks as well. Liverpool remained the best attack, with Arsenal remaining the best defense. One big thing for me that stands out is Chelsea remaining the second best attack, and actually the last 6 game weeks have been better for them than their overall season data, despite really poor performances in terms of actual output over the past few game weeks. Of course, failing to score against Everton, scoring just once against Fulham and losing, and then of course failing to score against Ipswich, but still amassing 2.46 expected goals per 90 minutes over the past 6 game weeks. That relates to me that is still a good functioning attack. They haven't really been found out. They just have not been finishing their chances over the past 3 weeks. And with the fixtures we saw in the first tab, I do still think I'd be holding on to a lot of those Chelsea players. Bournemouth are third, but over the past 6 weeks, they have been dropping down, and actually some of their data over the past 6 weeks has not nearly been as good. Looking at some of the big improvements, Newcastle really stand out alongside Arsenal as well. Big improvements for both of their attacks over the past 6 weeks, and are right up there now in terms of some of the best attacks in the league. When we start to have a look at defences, Arsenal and Liverpool remain really good, both recently and over the long term as well. This data doesn't include any data from the Brentford versus Arsenal game, which is of course taking place as I'm recording this. Again, Newcastle seeing big improvements. Newcastle are probably the best, most improved team over the past 6 game weeks, as you can see, both in terms of their attacking data and their defensive data. As we move further down the list, Spurs have actually got a lot worse. If you're owning a Pedro Porro, you're owning a new Doggy, you're owning a Forster in goal, it might be a time to potentially look to sell. Whereas Wolves lower down the list have been one of the biggest improvements in terms of defensive data. 1.64 per 90 for the season, but just 1.11 so far over the past 6. Although their fixtures get worse, if you own an 8 Nori, I'd probably keep him for this week. So to put that into a bit of perspective and talk about a few players you might be considering selling before we talk about those players you might be considering buying this week. First one is Jackson and Chelsea in general. Now for me, the next 3 fixtures still remain really, really good. And as we saw, the attacking data still remains really, really strong. If you own a Levi Colwill and you want to move to someone else in defence, there are some great defenders you could be looking to buy at the moment, which we'll talk about in a moment. But I'm not sure I'd be panic selling any of their attackers. Yes, there might be some players you like the look of, particularly in the midfield, if you want to upgrade an Enzo Fernandez to an Anthony Gordon or to an Ismail Assar, for example. But I'm not sure I get the mass sell of Jackson. Yes, he didn't start against Ipswich, which is going to lead into it. But Chelsea now go into playing basically 1 game a week, all the way up until about game week 27, when they do have a Southampton at home during a midweek. We've also seen Chelsea perform much worse when the likes of Nkunku and the likes of João Felix are on the pitch. As a Chelsea fan, I don't think Jackson gets benched at any time soon, maybe until we get to that game week 27 midweek fixture. And I'm not sure I'd be selling Jackson. I don't plan on doing it for my own team. Similarly with João Pedro, the underlying data has been okay. We actually saw from the attacking data that Brighton have been pretty good in terms of underlying data so far recently. If you are going to be selling João Pedro, this is probably the week to do it, because they do go up against Arsenal, which is the best defence in the league. He's definitely not a priority sell, but his actual output in terms of front of goal has not been that great. His XG this season has been okay. He is reliant on penalties though, and we're not getting that many in the Premier League. He's probably a fine hold, but if you do really like the idea of buying a Chris Wood, I don't have a problem with selling João Pedro this week, but he's not a priority sell. It's just a bad fixture this week. Then we have the 2 suspended players, Matheus Cunha and Morgan Rogers. They're actually owned by about 25% of active managers together. So about 1 in 4 of you watching this video will own both Matheus Cunha and Rogers, who are both suspended for this week. For me, if you're looking to sell one of them, Cunha is the one I'd be selling first. Again, the run of fixtures they do have after this week is not great, and I do think there's some really nice forwards you could potentially look to jump on. If you own only one of these and you have the luxury to either bench Cunha or bench Morgan Rogers this week, I would actually be looking to do that, because I do still think they're both great options. Cunha is looking fantastic. Wolves are okay going forward. Yes, they've got Newcastle, Chelsea and Arsenal in the next 3 after his suspension. That's why I'd probably sell, but he's probably up there with one of the best forwards in the game, and he's the highest scoring forward in FPL at the moment. So Rogers and Cunha are both still holds for me. If you own both, I would sell Cunha first. And the final one is going to be the Arsenal defence. They are starting to get a little bit more difficult in terms of fixtures. I am recording before the Brentford game, so I don't know if they do keep a clean sheet. For me, they're just good long-term holds. If you need money, I'd probably looking to free up money elsewhere. There's not really that much benefit to moving around money, particularly in goalkeepers. If you are looking at goalkeepers to buy in their place, I do think the likes of Jordan Pickford, Matt Sells, and then Henderson of Crystal Palace are probably the top 3 I'd be looking to buy. But I'm not sure I'd be selling Arsenal defence, even with their fixtures getting a little bit more difficult now. Having a look at defenders to buy this week. Number 1 in terms of the cheap options is going to be Timothy Castagne. Now, we don't actually know if they're going to stick with the back 5. With Smith Rowe and Sander Berge coming back, they might go back to a back 4 because they have more midfielders that they could field. But either way, 4.2 with the fixtures they've got coming up, Castagne is a fantastic buy. If you don't want to go there, or you already own him or Robinson, and you want another cheaper option, Ezri Konsa with Leicester at home this week, and quite a nice run of fixtures as we spoke about with Rogers over the next 6 to 10 game weeks. I don't mind going with Konsa at 4.4. Another option is Howson of Bournemouth. Has a fantastic fixture this week at home to Everton. One of the best banker fixtures you can have at the moment in terms of clean sheet potential. But after that, things do get a little bit more difficult for Bournemouth, and the fixtures do start to tail off a bit. Moving into the slightly more expensive ones, Hall, Munoz, Robinson and Kirkes are probably the top 4 that you're looking at in that bracket. Because of the Bournemouth fixtures over the longer term, Kirkes is dropping off, and we're left with Hall, Munoz and Robinson being pretty close between all 3 of those. Robinson's actually ranked 3rd in this list, just because I think Castagne is now a better buy. He's 0.8 million less, and playing in a very similar position and similar role in that Fulham team at the moment. If Castagna wasn't playing and he wasn't an alternative, maybe Robinson would be slightly higher up. But because of that, Robinson is third in this list. Newcastle and Hull just look so good. They are clicking. We saw it with the underlying data. One of the most improved teams, both in terms of attack and in terms of defense. And Lewis Hall is an absolute focal point in both of those things. Getting up that left-hand side, but also defensive solidity. And so he is number one, despite going away to Spurs this week. Next up is going to be Munoz. I do really like his attacking threat. I think he had over 0.5 expected goal involvement in the game against Southampton. It is Chelsea at home this week, which isn't the best entry point, which is why if you're looking to buy Hall or Munoz, it's probably not the best week to go and buy them. I'd probably be looking to do something else with your transfers this week. But long term, Hall 1, Munoz 2, Robinson 3, Castagna probably in there as well. If I had to rank all of these as a collective, I probably would put Castagna above Robinson just based off the value. In terms of slightly more expensive one, we're going with Trent Alexander-Arnold in at number one. The fixtures do still remain really good. I wouldn't be worried about Manchester United this week. There is rumours to him to Real Madrid, but I very, very highly doubt that happens, especially in January. Gabriel and the Arsenal defence does remain in number two with how solid they are. And then number three, it's about time we start talking about the Nottingham Forest defence again. Aina is 5.2. You can go with Milenkovic in at 4.7. It does also look like Neco Williams at 4.3 may well be an option that you could go and buy. Although he's not fully nailed, we could see Alex Moreno take his place back at some point. If you are wanting to punt and you've got other defenders, you could go and buy Neco Williams. But personally, I'd be looking at Milenkovic or Olareina and going with the ones with more attacking threat and just more solidity of minutes. Now, if I had to rank these all together, Trent would be 1, Gabriel would be 2. I probably would put Hall number 3 and Munoz number 4, Castagna in at number 5 as the cheaper option. Then you've got the likes of the Forest defence along with Robinson, and then Konsa and Howson probably ranked at the bottom of this 9. Moving up the pitch, let's have a look at some top midfielders to buy. Now, there's a lot of talk about potential midfielders. There's a few that aren't listed on here. First of all is going to be the Manchester United midfield. If you've got the likes of Bruno Fernandes and Ahmad, I do think they're actually good holds. They have Liverpool away, which is not great, but then they have a few good fixtures, and particularly home fixtures. Southampton at home and Brighton at home in the next two after that Liverpool away fixture. I'm not sure I'd be moving off the Manchester United midfield at the moment. Also, if you've got the likes of Enzo Fernandez, we spoke about Rodgers earlier, I would probably be holding on to them. If you're looking to buy midfielders now, these are probably the top 6 I'd be looking to buy. Now, let's start off with Arsenal. I've seen the lineup. I haven't watched the game. It might be that Martin Odegaard does really well, and he's the one to go and look at. The constant debate between Martin Odegaard and Martinelli is pretty close. Martinelli is probably the slightly cheaper. I think he plays very well. He's quite central, but if Odegaard does really well tonight, it may well be him that starts to become a good option. Arsenal are not ticking quite as well going forward as maybe you'd hope at time of recording. Again, I feel like I need to caveat that if they go and score 3 or 4 goals tonight, then things might change a little bit. But I do think with their fixtures coming up and the sort of lack of rotation that they can have with the amount of players they've got unavailable, I do think having a look at some of their players is still a really nice place to go. However, for me, the number one option at the moment is going to be Anthony Gordon. The upcoming fixtures look great. That's 4 returns on the bounce for him. If you've got 7.4 million, he is rising and rising very, very quickly. He's probably the best one I would go to. And do not be put off by Spurs away this week. Despite it being the early kickoff, they tend to be pretty poor defensively. It's not going to be long before Brian and Birmingham is back on the menu. Southampton away this week could be a nice entry point. Then it's City at home and Liverpool at home after that. Not the best couple of games, but after that they do enter a really nice run. And I know some of you are looking at potential Visa purchase in your forward line. And I don't think it's going to be that long before Brian and Birmingham does come back on the menu. But I do think Gordon's a better buy. Luis Diaz does look like he's in the first choice Liverpool lineup. Is he fully nailed? Probably not. They don't play more than 1 game a week though until we get to about game week 26 or game week 27. They have a Champions League game which looks like they're pretty done and dusted in that competition in terms of qualification as well. So I do think Luis Diaz should start all of the next 4. Will he play 90 minutes? Unlikely. Will he start them? Probably. If I was again buying Luis Diaz versus Gordon, I would just probably go for the solidity of minutes that I know I get with Gordon. I probably would go with Gordon over Mbeumo, over Luis Diaz, over the Arsenal midfield, and probably over Savinho as well, or Savio. For me, I wouldn't be investing in the Manchester City attack. They've had a couple of good games. They've had sort of mixed results. Savinho won a penalty. He scored a goal. I'm just still not in love with him as an FPL asset. A few returns recently doesn't really change that for me. In terms of sort of actual output, he is the lowest that we've got on this list. If I was looking for a cheaper option, it would be Ismail Assar. The issue with that is he does have Chelsea at home this week, which is not the best entry point. But from game week 21 onwards, Sarr is probably the best cheap option, which starts with Leicester away, West Ham away, who are without Bowen now, and Brentford at home. So Gordon, if you have the money, if not, Sarr are my best 2 midfielders to buy this week. And finally, we're wrapping off with best forwards to buy. And I've had to create a little bit of new graphic because there are so many to talk about. Alexander Isak is the most expensive. If you own him, he is a great hold. If you don't own him, he's probably still the best to buy because the upcoming fixtures continue to look really good and his output is just unmatched at the moment. Now, Ollie Watkins is starting to get a little bit of attention because Duran is injured. He came in, he played really well, he got a goal and assist, he's on penalties, he's got Leicester at home up next. But the only issue is after that, when Duran is back for that Everton fixture, are we guaranteeing that Watkins keep his place, given that it was Duran in the lineup before? I think Aston Villa are a better team when Watkins is in the lineup, so I hope and expect that he keeps his place, but it's not guaranteed, which is what puts me off recommending you buying Watkins at the moment until we see maybe that Everton game and if he keeps his place. Now, Leicester at home is a fantastic entry point, and I get that, but it's not secure enough for me to go and recommend buying him. But if you want a punt and you think he keeps his place, then absolutely go and do it at 8.8 million. We spoke a little bit about Jackson earlier on. I personally wouldn't be selling him. I understand that maybe you don't want to look to buy at the moment, but if you own Jackson, I wouldn't be selling. And he's up there in terms of online data with some of the best on this list. He's actually third for expecting goal involvement per 90 out of any of the forwards that we've got here. Dominic Solanke, Spurs are just untrusted at the moment. He's also not on penalties. Well, he might be now that Son has missed his last one, but we also don't know that for certain. Also, the fixtures over the next few are just not good enough to go and invest in him. Moving down to Arsenal, we spoke about some of their midfield. Havertz has missed out tonight with a potential illness. There is apparently one going around the camp at the moment at Arsenal, so you can't buy Havertz, but I've always said that I'd buy the cheaper option in Gabriel Jesus out of him anyway. I still don't mind that going forward. He looks like he's going to keep his place anyway. He is pretty nailed, and he's the cheapest option, really, and most reliable option into that Arsenal attack at the moment. So I do still quite like the Gabriel Jesus purchase. Next up is we've got Gakpo. A little bit like Luis Diaz, is I can't guarantee that he plays every single game for me to go and recommend him. He actually does feel like the most nailed of all those attackers, but with Jota back, does Jota get back into the team through the central position, and does that mean that Luis Diaz and Gakpo are competing a little bit? I really like Gakpo when he starts, but with Jota back, again, I can't really recommend buying any of the Liverpool attackers until we see things settle down a little bit. And it might depend as well on who they're playing. So I don't think I'd be buying Gakpo at the moment. I'd be looking for players who are nailed, playing 80, 90 minutes every week, and I don't feel like Gakpo falls into that category at the moment. Mateta at Crystal Palace, I much prefer going and buying Sarr as a cheaper option in midfield. I don't mind him if you want that up front, but I'd personally be going for one of the other options on here, and going with a Sarr in midfield is the way I'd go. Now, the big ones that we are looking at this week, let's just talk briefly about João Pedro. We spoke about him earlier. Again, just to highlight, I don't think I'd be selling João Pedro if you've got him. He's not a priority sell, but if you want to go for one of these other options who are maybe slightly more prolific in front of goals at the moment, I don't think it's a bad idea. You're probably not buying João Pedro. He's not a priority sell, but I can understand if you do want to move him on. The other three are probably the ones that are getting a lot of attention. You've got Chris Wood, you've got Visa, and then you've got Raul Jimenez as well. Jimenez's next three fixtures are the best out of all of those three. Online data is also really, really strong. It's just when you get to a midweek round of fixtures, you can be almost certain that he's not going to start a midweek fixture, and you can almost be certain that he's going to get taken off after 70 minutes, which is what does put me off Jimenez, but the upcoming fixtures are really nice. Visa, the upcoming fixtures are still not good enough for me to be investing in, but I do have one eye on him, and it is my man Chris Wood that a lot of you are looking to buy. He's on the thumbnail for this video, and I absolutely cannot put you off. I don't think the next 8 fixtures are actually as good as maybe they look when you have a glance at it. I think there are some quite difficult games. Particularly, they've got Liverpool at home, but they do have Wolves away, who are, of course, without Cunha. They've got Southampton at home in the next 3. It does look like a pretty good entry point into him. So if I had to pick a forward line on Wildcard at the moment, it probably would be Isak and Chris Wood. The third one would kind of depend on budget. If you could get up to Watkins and you fancied a punt, I'd go there. If you could go to Jackson, I still really like him as a pick. If you don't want either of them, it's probably Gabriel Jesus, Jimenez, or João Pedro as the third option. If I had to put sort of my money on it, Chris Wood, Isak, and Jackson are still my top 3. Some of you might not agree with Jackson, and I get that. And outside of that, I probably would just stick with João Pedro alongside Chris Wood. So just before we wrap up, lots of you are asking about a wildcard. Now, this is the first opportunity to play your second wildcard. I do not like it at all as an opportunity, but if your team is in a mess and you want to change things up, this is what a team would look like if I was wildcarding this week. Matt Sales is in goal along with Henderson as a nice duo in a rotation. It's good to have 2 keepers for the rest of the season if you are wildcarding early. 3 cheap defenders in Lewis, Hall, Castagna and Mikalenko. Again, if you don't have the money and you want to downgrade Mikalenko to someone like a Greaves who looks like he's got his place back, I don't mind that. Alongside Gabriel and alongside Trent as well. Again, if you do need to free up some money, Gabriel to Timber could be a way that you could look to do it. Into midfield, we're going with Salah, Palmer, and as I spoke about, a big fan of Anthony Gordon. Ismail Assar this week with Rodgers. If you wanted to go with Ahmad or someone like that, you potentially could, but I think that's probably the 5 midfielders I'd go with. And up front is Wood, Isak, and Jackson. Now, I can guarantee there'll be people in the comments saying they cannot afford this team. One of the obvious ways that I'm sure you will look to do that is downgrading Jackson. You could go to Gabriel Jesus, which is probably the obvious one. You could go to a Mateta. You could come all the way down to a João Pedro or a Jimenez. So if you can't afford this team, that Jackson spot is probably the obvious way to free up money. Probably Gabriel Jesus, probably João Pedro, or probably Jimenez are probably the top 3 replacements. But if you're wildcarding this week, I would look to build something like this. Anyway, we've looked at best defenses, best attacks, best fixtures, and then we've looked at individual players across defenders, midfielders, forwards, and apologies, as I said, Happy New Year. That's why there weren't videos over the past couple of days. I hope you've had a fantastic New Year, Christmas period if you were celebrating. Thank you very much for the support. Thank you for the nice comments on the New Year's post as well. We are back officially with the video schedule. Thank you so much for watching. 2,000 likes is the aim. Drop any questions you have about your team, about your transfers, if you're on Wildcard this week, in the comment section down below. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.